panel at one of the various conferences. Would probably wait a few minutes to allow people to start joining. So we'll give everybody a few minutes to get going, and then we'll start. So thank you for your patience as we wait for attendees to come on board. Sometimes using technology is a little bit more challenging. We'll give everybody one more minute, and then we'll get started. All right, I think we should get started, and then we'll see the attendees as they start to join. Also, keep in mind that we are recording this, so let's get going. So, hello and welcome to the first of the International Gaming Standards Association live webinars. My name is Mark Pace, and I'm the Managing Director of GSA Europe. These webinars are based on the topics that we've covered in the Conversations YouTube video series. You can access those Conversations videos by clicking on the YouTube logo, and you'll find that at the bottom right of the main igsa.org page. I'd like to start by thanking our inaugural panelists for taking the time to participate. I'm sure that you will find this session to be both fun and informative. A few housekeeping things before we get started. For the attendees, if you have a question, please click on the Q&A button, which you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Then just type your question in. If you wish to ask a question of a specific panelist, then please identify that person in your question. We have GSA staff that is standing by, and they are looking at the questions. They're going to be grouping them by topic, and then we'll go through them at the end in the Q&A section of this webinar. Also, please note this webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the igsa.org website. Again, you find it by clicking on the YouTube icon off of the main page. As I mentioned, GSA is really grateful to these panelists who have so very generously agreed to share their gaming industry and GSA standards experience. I'll ask each of them to give a short bio of themselves after I introduce them. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists and sort of going in alphabetical order from the Alberta Gaming Lottery Corporation. We have Mr. Greg Bennett, who's the Senior Manager, Technical Products and Compliance. Greg?
Yeah, I've been working with the GSA and the G2S standard for about 10 years. It's one of the things that we pushed through because we have about 1,000 sites and quite a large area to cover, and it made sense to go with the GSA protocol.
Great, thank you. From the Atlantic Lottery Corporation, we have Mr. Paul Burns, who's the Senior Manager, Strategy and Marketing, and also is a GSA board member. Paul, hello.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, I've been in the lottery gaming industry for over 35 years now, and have been involved in our video lottery program since its inception in 1990. We were one of the first jurisdictions in North America to implement video lottery. Over that time, I've been involved from a field service management perspective, product development, marketing, and then since the implementation of G2S, also onboarding net new gaming vendors to our market to bring into the G2S world, as well as involved in our back-end central system. And as Mark indicated, I'm an executive board member with IGSA, serving in the capacity of secretary and treasurer.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we have from the Western Canada Lottery Corporation, Mr. Erik Karmark, who is the VP of VLT Gaming and Operations. Hello, Eric.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm a 32-year technology veteran, worked across a number of industries, finance, technology, and last but not least, gaming, of which I've been working for almost 15 years. The vast majority, probably 14 and 13 years of those have been with the GSA and with the G2S protocol. I currently look after the Video Lottery Division in Saskatchewan, where we have 4,200 VLTs running across 570 retail locations and happily purring on the G2S protocol. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I think it's absolutely fantastic that our three panelists come from different disciplines within the gaming industry. We've got compliance, we've got operations, we've got marketing, and I think that will really allow us to explore the value that the GSA game to system or G2S standard will provide operators. I would like to start out with a specific question for each of the panelists, and then we'll go through questions that are sort of open for anyone to answer. However, I'd like this to be as interactive as possible, so please feel free to add to the answer provided. So gentlemen, if you're ready, we'll kick the panel off with the first question going to Mr. Bennett. So Greg, can you share with us how the G2S standard helps operators comply with regulatory requirements, as well as perhaps, regulators verifying that compliance?
Yeah, the biggest benefit that we found with going to the GSA protocols is our ability to download information to the games, download OSs, download bill acceptors, card readers, even printers. And our jurisdiction is quite a large one by physical size. And we have technicians going out all over the place doing these upgrades. And it would take us several months to do these upgrades. With the use of the protocol, I literally can change a game once it's been gone through its regulatory processes. I can change a game in a few hours in a few machines. I can do a network in a few days. This allows us to be a lot more active in updating software, especially if something is found as an anomaly or something's just not working right. In addition to that, what the system does allows program validation. So basically, it does check our software to make sure that it is what we put on it. And we have that done several times. So a logic door is opened, or the machine is powered off, or just ad hoc, we're verifying the software is a match to what the copy is in our central system. This is very much helpful in the fact that I don't have to send investigators or technicians to verify software. I can do it on the system and be confident that what's on the terminal is what is meant to be there.
And I would imagine that you're doing that authentication using the G2S version of GAT, correct?
Correct.
And then you mentioned something that I just want to make sure I understand. When you said you're downloading software, and I think you mentioned an OS game theme, and also the firmware that goes to printers and to bill validators, you're doing that from a compliance perspective. If, for example, a particular version is obsoleted, or if there's something that's being revoked, and that way for a fact that what's running in those machines is the latest approved version of that software.
Correct.
Excellent. I think that's a really big value add, and as you mentioned, being distributed, it even adds more value. However, if you've got a casino that has 1,000, 1,500 slot machines, being able to do exactly what you just described is of significant value as well. So Paul, going over to you, if you don't mind. GSA often touts how its standards can improve an operator's marketing efforts. Can you share with us your views on this? Number one, do you agree? And if you do, perhaps could you share like one or two examples of how G2S practically helps in marketing efforts?
Absolutely. And yes, I do agree with that statement, Mark. First thing that comes to mind for me is, picking up on Greg's comment of remote downloading. So in our marketplace, we have over 6,000 VLTs and 1,000 sites across 4 different jurisdictions with 4 different sets of operating regulatory frameworks. So for us to get product quickly in front of the player and uniquely is one of the key features from a marketing perspective. So with the ability to remote download and with the ability to be able to sequence your games in the game chooser. So taking a new game theme, identifying to the player that it's new, we can put it in the number 1 spot in the top left corner. We can also add, a new game sash to that game icon, which tells the player right away. I mean, typically when you look at anything from a player's perspective, you go to the top left corner first and go left to right and then down. It's a really great opportunity to identify the players, especially in a distributed market. Everything is a multi-game suite. So you want your new opportunities or the games you're trying to promote front and center, right? As well, there's a scheduling component that we take advantage of as well. So we can have a set of games that run during the daytime for players. And then when you get a different crowd come in the evening, we can use an automatic scheduler to switch those games over. And that's all done remotely. And from other marketing concepts from the media class, I know, Erik, I'll let you jump in here, that you're definitely, with a specific situation, taking advantage of that as well.
Yes, absolutely. One really good example of being able to leverage the media display capabilities for us over through the G2S protocol has been being able to leverage the modern browser-based framework to actually display things like details of the wide area jackpot winners, details of new games, and other significant promotional information without relying upon the services of a gaming or marketing vendor. One particular most relevant case of that is COVID-19, where we've been able to immediately display instructions for social distancing and machine sanitization to the player community, much to the great relief of our regulators in being able to address that particular concern.
That's fantastic. Really cool use case there of the player user interface capabilities. Paul, if I might going back to you to what you were touching on in terms of downloading game themes and using a scheduler to change them. The idea of network gaming and remote configuration and download, which I know people sometimes argue, well, you have to download a machine before you can configure it, but whatever. That was tried in North America several years ago, and especially in the US, and even in some places in Europe. It sort of at first was very exciting, and then it did not work. I used to work for WMS Gaming and actually was in charge of the remote gaming system. We had a system that only worked with WMS games. The system that you're describing in use in your facility downloads and configures games across multiple manufacturers. Is that correct?
That is correct. We currently have 3 major gaming manufacturers on our network, each with 8 to 12 games on a multi-game suite, and everything works seamless.
And can you download game theme NOS or just game themes?
No, game themes OS. As Greg had indicated, we're using the same system, peripheral updates as we need to. So
wow.
if you have to make a quick printer configuration change, or if you have a new bill currency coming out, it's just a matter of pushing that OS down.
That's great. Thank you very much. All right. Let's say, actually, Erik, I'll continue with you if you don't mind. So obviously the Canadian gaming market is unique in that, as you all have been describing, the GSA standards usage is far more prevalent, and especially in the video lottery terminal operations side as opposed to the casino operations side. So perhaps you could share some operational functions and their value that you guys as VLT operators can take advantage of, whereas your casino colleagues could not. I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm just trying to understand maybe some of the functionalities that you guys can do that perhaps the casino guys would love to be able to do in the future.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, in addition to the superior command and control and monitoring capabilities of G2S, which compared to SAS is years ahead. One particular function reflecting what Greg and Paul have already mentioned stands out for us is that of downloadable gaming, which includes peripherals, machine OS, firmware. With this ability, we have been able to save literally millions of dollars in operational costs by avoiding unnecessary site visits across a large geographic footprint. And that's something that's obviously unique to video lottery, but it's been extremely beneficial. Our time to market for new games is immediate, and so is our ability to analyze performance in a very meaningful way with the extensive data that G2S is able to offer. In recent years, we'd had the G2S based downloadable gaming in a slot program, but it was poorly implemented and impractical to use. And ultimately validate our assumption that G2S is a great protocol, but there has to be vendor buy-in for it to be successfully implemented. One of the things that VLT programs have, which is unique perhaps to the industry, is we were able to take a greenfield approach where we deployed the entire network all at once. And so we were able to leverage economies of scale and also get vendors in the room together to collaborate on how to actually efficiently manage to deploy downloadable gaming capabilities. And I don't think I'm telling tales out of school. That one particular vendor I know for a fact used Saskatchewan as their test bed to refine the downloadable gaming for the benefit of their slot product. So, there's a great case where there can be, cross line of business collaboration and benefit.
And in essence, if I understand what you said, they were sort of honing their skills, making sure that the downloading capabilities were at a point where they were practically usable, and then could bring it to other markets.
That's exactly right. I mean, obviously, it was a concept, back in 2008, 2009, and we saw lots of demonstrations at G2E of proof of concept, but it was never really. It was more of a fad that was talked about versus something that was practical to implement on a large scale. Because we were dealing with thousands of machines across a wide area network, we had a very, very valuable use case in terms of cost savings. So I think all of us in the operator community, customer community, were very much behind encouraging vendors to develop that properly and finalize that product. What I think happened as a result is the VLT central systems have a fantastic downloadable gaming capability, but that's yet to be implemented on the slot side. It's really, I think, a case of customer demand has to be there for that same technology capability to be deployed in that market. It certainly exists.
But by customer, do you mean the operators or players?
The operators. I think that one of the challenges, I guess the differences in the casino is it's easy to dispatch a field technician on the floor to quickly deploy software. So why do it? But if you actually look at the bigger picture and say you have a casino property of 10,000 machines, suddenly you can start seeing economies of scale that build a business case to demand that feature, and then obviously drive vendors to deploy it properly.
Well, and not to harp on something that is pretty top of mind right now and is in the news media, but you mentioned COVID-19 earlier. I think one of the things that we all need to be sort of aware of is, as we reopen casinos, we need to make sure that we're not only protecting our patrons, but we're also protecting our staff. And if there's a way that we can use technology to eliminate some of the manual touch points that might expose people to all kinds of stuff. I mean, I think there's some other value that could be sort of derived from some of these technologies. I do want to touch one more point that you made, Erik, and that is, I think you said that you're able to analyze slot machine performance in a way that you could not before because of the data that you're pulling from slot machines. Did I understand that correctly?
It's more about the information that machine behavior. There's a volume of information in G2S that just isn't available in SAS. It is a larger protocol, but there's a huge amount of information that can be harvested from it, and we're really only just starting to scratch the surface of the capability in the G2S space. But I think the capability is probably being exhausted in the SAS space just because of the age of that protocol.
Got it. Thank you. So one of the other things that I'll open up as a question to all the panelists is, I'm sure you sort of heard this a long time ago when you first started down the G2S path, especially since it's been 10 some years now that you all have been working on this, and that is that the comment that G2S is too big, it's too difficult, it's too expensive to implement. So based on your experience with both, I guess, implementing and using G2S, would you agree or disagree with some of those statements? And I'll throw it out to you guys, whoever wants to answer.
That was certainly our concern 10 years ago when we were considering the G2S-based network. But now, as I said, we have over 570 sites running 4,200 terminals, and we're just the smallest network. ALC, MBLL, HLC, they have over 6,500 terminals. Quebec has 10,000 terminals running. In addition to vendors using data compression to reduce the size of data transmissions, network and storage capacity has increased manyfold. To such an extent that G2S size and complexity never forms part of a capacity-related discussion anymore. In fact, the sophistication of the protocol has allowed us rapid development of features such as wide area progressive capability across disparate vendors faster than it likely occurred in the days of SAS, because it is an open published protocol with no risk of vendor lock-in or proprietary leveraging. In addition to these considerations, there are suppliers such as Comtrade who make readily built software stacks to allow vendors to rapidly implement G2S. So there's no longer a barrier to their entry into our market, especially.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? That Comtrade also is a GSA member, and they do build a G2S stack both for the system side as well as for the game side. And I know a number of companies that have actually purchased or licensed that stack and are using it as a way to rapidly ramp up their G2S product offering. So that's a really good point. Anybody else want to add anything?
I think that any time a protocol is developed, you're always going to have your growing pains. And when we first started, we did have some issues. But I think that, as to Erik, the technology has moved quite a bit and has really settled into its groove. We're all running this protocol, and very few times do you run into an issue and you get all this extra support from your games, the ability to download. I think that when you first get into it, there is a learning curve. However, jurisdictions like us have really kind of pushed that learning curve away, and you can benefit from our knowledge and the vendors. Some of the major vendors are the same vendors that are doing the slot equipment, are very good at designing a protocol that will work with their machines. We get machines all the time now, new, and there's a lot less development in getting these things to work than there was in the early 2000s.
That's a good point. And I mean, the G2S has been around for quite a while. SAS has been around, for much longer. So I think just as with any new thing, right, the vendors themselves had to sort of get acclimated to and develop the expertise with the standard. But to your point, they've been doing this now for upwards of a decade, and now they've gotten really good at it. Which I guess leads me to another point. I mean, you guys have mentioned three vendors, right? So one of the other things that we hear is, well, nobody's implemented G2S, or there's only one or maybe two suppliers of gaming devices that have actually implemented G2S. So what I'm hearing from you guys is that is not really the case, correct?
I'll jump in here. Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Across Canada, we all have, for the most part, the three major North American gaming vendors in our programs, but we also have many more looking to join in. And the issue is never really around the effort around developing to G2S. The issue is always around market capacity. How many terminals can they buy in for? How much R&D effort do they need to put in as a market entry point, and then what's their return? So, and that's typically because from a game development perspective, the backend protocol is universal. The game dev side is unique to every jurisdiction because we all have different min bet, max bet, top boards, RTPs. So they have to do a unique game set. But from a development perspective and the availability now of tool sets such as Red Blue, getting your basic cabinet up and running command control is not as difficult as some may think it is.
Great, thank you. Somebody else wanted to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, in our experience, most of the major players have already implemented a variant of G2S. For example, IGT, Scientific Games, Aristocrat, Nevermatic, and even Konami. But the level of implementation has been proportional to customer demand. In this regard, the central system or CMS is key. I think customers really need to truly understand the longer-term benefits of G2S so they can demand it, that it forms part of their longer-term gaming technology strategy.
And actually, Erik, that's a good point, right? That G2S is a big protocol. I mean, I think that the last time I looked at the spec, it was like over 3,000 pages long. But that doesn't make it, more difficult to implement. It just says it's got a lot of functionality, and as you all know, G2S is broken down into what we call classes. So the number of classes that you implement really are market driven. I mean, there's a core set of classes. There's 6 of them which are required in order for a slot machine or a VLT or an EGD, call it whatever you want, to be able to communicate to a back end system or to any system. But beyond that, then there's a whole bunch of, I'll call them optional classes that you implement only if the market demands them. So I think that's the point that you're trying to make there. Thank you. All right, so moving on. Another question that I thought would be interesting to address is, we've also, as GSA, been saying that G2S can help not only reduce costs, but also increase revenues. I think, Erik, you said that, G2S has saved you millions of operational dollars in terms of having to deal with employees going, across the various locations to do work. But given your experience, can you perhaps quantify the real monetary value claim? Is that something that's occurring?
Let me start. Two different perspectives from an OpEx perspective. Given, as I had mentioned earlier, 1,000 sites over 4 different provincial jurisdictions. In the old days, when you had to visit each machine to put out new product to generate revenue, you had that initial OpEx cost that you had to recoup. As well, when it took 4 to 6 months to get a new game generating revenue, your ROI took much longer. Now with remote downloading, as Greg had indicated earlier, you can push a game down to your entire network in days. Therefore, you're generating revenue instantly. So you're saving on your OpEx overhead, but you're also bringing in that incremental revenue a lot faster.
Yeah, I think reflecting that, the speed of product to market with the G2S platform has been greatly improved. We've had cases where we put games in the field and the vendor said, yeah, we think the players don't like this particular feature. Let's just tweak that and redeploy it, and boom, as long as we get it through GLI, we can have an updated game in a matter of a few weeks. It would have taken many, many months in a traditional PROM type of replacement program that from yesteryear. As well, we've been able to improve player engagement through the application of G2S-based media display capabilities. Also, the ability to trace and diagnose issues have greatly improved, which naturally reduces operational costs and potential risk of lost revenues. We've been able to get everybody together in a room. Everybody understands the protocol. As long as the techies are allowed to communicate with one another, it's very, very easy to quickly eliminate any pinch points that are potentially ultimately cost you revenue.
Similarly, we've had issues where a game had a malfunction and literally turned it around in a week or so, updated in our machines. And this was one of our top games several years ago. And we could not stand to have this one down for any length of time. So we were able to get it up and running, fixed, tested, and back in the customer's hands. The other thing that I think that people don't realize as much, it actually creates the game, or at least in Alberta, the game staff that pick and choose what type of games, they tend to be a little more creative because it doesn't take 6 months after the game is developed to get it in the field to find out it doesn't work. When you've got this ability to put something in, you put it in as a trial. You can try it at different sites. I mean, although we have 800 current sites, they're in different locations and they're very different patrons that go there. Some are in casinos, some are in what we call games rooms, and some are in the local bar. So you may not put the same game set in there because it's a different crowd. And our gaming staff have been moving up the bets and trying things that in the past would not have happened because we were always so worried about protecting revenue. And with the ability to move things around, you actually have that ability to try new things, and some work, some don't, but at least you had the ability to try, and then you can kind of market to certain players where you couldn't before. You just kind of had to put it to everyone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Greg. Going back, Erik, to something that you touched on, which was the media display, right? Which is, again, that player user interface, or some people refer to it as picture-in-picture. Have you been developing, or have you thought of developing some responsible gaming or player protection capabilities to display in that window?
Yeah, so we actually do have a product from our central system vendor that is built on that same web framework. So in our case, it's the Intelligent Central System, has the, I think it's called PSM, Player Services Module. I think ALC has a similar capability, so the players are able to see their spend and be aware and self-manage their play behavior. So yes, it's already in place, and it's working very well, and it could be extended further if we wanted to. I'm sure it will be in due time.
And then one other question, I think it goes back to something that you touched on, Paul, which is why do you think that there is this perception that slot manufacturers can't get into these G2S markets, or specifically the Canadian market? Is it because the VLT market is small? Is it because of the replacement cycle? What do you think those barriers might be?
Well, when G2S first hit the market, I thought the original concept was going to be for, large casino floors because of all of the features and benefits that were available. So I think, what you really need to do is you need to look at your internal processes and say, specifically, what are we trying to improve in our in our organization or on our casino floors, and what classes within G2S, as you mentioned, Mark, there's multiple classes. Which ones of those could we take advantage of to provide a better player experience to our patrons, and as well look at from an operational efficiency of our organization to try to get product to our players in a more efficient manner.
Okay, that makes sense. And then Greg, something that you said sort of resonated with me when you were talking about, you know, the ability to change stuff if there's a WMS. We were famous for having an anomaly in our code. That's a long time ago. But this idea of being able to very quickly put something, discover there's a problem, you know, get it fixed, get it retested, get it approved, and then deployed. I mean, you know, there are jurisdictions out there that outside of the US where if an operator wants to even move a machine or change a game theme, those games are dark for days, weeks, in some cases even months, because they're using, you know, tamper-proof tape, and they have to send an agent, a regulatory agent, to be there to oversee the RAM clear and the installation of the new game media, and making sure that it's set according to the jurisdictional requirements. I mean, what you described, not only is it a labor savings for the regulators, because, you know, they don't need to send agents to all these places, but really it's a huge benefit for the operators in terms of minimizing risk. And I think you mentioned that, right? It really reduces the risk of running bad software, wrong software, what have you. But also it could potentially increase revenue, because now you moved a machine, you've converted a machine, you've done all that stuff, and you've done it much more frequently. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct. A couple of things. If you put the wrong software in a machine, if it happens to come from the warehouse or wherever with the wrong software, GAT won't let it come up at all. It will fail. But our VLTs in Alberta are still sealed, just like a normal unit. And because you can download it and verify it with the system, the seals do not get broken. So the only time really you're breaking seals is if you're replacing logic boards. And then, as you guys know, the hardware now is much better than what it was years ago. So we very rarely have issues of where we've had to send someone out to take you know, version numbers and so on and so forth. So our regulators don't need to go, or technicians don't need to go to the field just to check those things. We can actually pull it from the system and verify that it works. Great. Verify that it's the correct version.
That's really good information. It's good. That's good info to have there. I'm thinking of another question. So obviously G2S is implemented across the VLT side, and as I mentioned earlier, again, not trying to pick a fight, but in Canada, for whatever reason or reasons, and probably very valid ones, the casino side has not implemented yet. But since you guys have gone through it and now have been using G2S for a decade, what advice would you have for other operators who may not know how to start down a path of, you know, adopting G2S, or maybe are sitting there going, oh my God, this is an all or nothing kind of thing, or how much money is this going to cost me? I'm not going to worry about it. Anybody?
One of the benefits that Video Lottery had, at least a few years ago, was we literally forklifted in a new system and new VLTs. So it made it very easy. One of the problems, if you have a site, you know, with 1,500 slot machines, it is difficult to retrofit some of the older stuff. But there is some real value in even looking at a hybrid system or a multiple system and move things over. I think, you know, as replacement cycles go, there's a lot more equipment that is G2S capable than what there was a few years ago. And I think that's the way to do it, and will help things move along. It doesn't make sense to, if you have 15,000 machines, to change all the machines out. But if you did a hybrid floor, I think you'd soon learn that the G2S is very helpful. It is giving you the information that when we do buy new machines, we want to put them on the new system, not the old.
Yeah. I think also reflecting that, it has to be part of a unified long-term technology strategy where an organization's technology and executive community need to understand and embrace the benefits of the G2S platform, particularly its openness. G2S is now where HTML was, I think, 30 years ago. Some may argue that protocols don't make money, and these are typically the same folks that once thought the internet was a fad, I think. Yet here we are now with the world transacting trillions of dollars on the internet. So in our VLT program, we only leverage a very small subset of G2S capabilities and have seen significant benefits. I personally really look forward to the day that I see a large casino property truly implemented to its full extent, as I personally believe with the right resources and mindset, it could blow the doors off of the competition through using best of breed solutions and the efficiencies that would be offered from that openness that's built right in.
So to that point, Erik, the concept of best of breed and the openness of G2S, have any of you in your organizations considered developing your own software or partnering with other software providers, given the fact that G2S allows multiple hosts to be connected or multiple systems to be connected to the slot machines, maybe a separate analytical tool or some other software to do maybe better beverage service or something like that?
I think all of us have our own little discrete activities. Any of us with a technology background see the tantalizing benefits that are available and be able to connect that stream of information. It does take some collaboration with gaming vendors because we don't want to start hanging off weird exotic pieces of hardware that could risk the integrity of the environment. But for sure, I know in our shop we have some interesting discussions about some concepts we'd like to look at within the next 5 years for sure.
Paul, were you going to say something? Sorry, the box moved.
Yeah, I
over
was
to
just
you.
going to say, Mark, jumping back to the, how do you implement it on a casino floor? The other, thing to take into consideration is you can't just look at comparing the cost of a CMS to a G2S system, because G2S can do more than just command and control.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look at your overall, floor cost, because you can have player tracking built into your G2S system. So you'd have to take all your different floor modules, look at that overall picture. And, to Erik's point, it has to be part of your overall technology and strategy path going forward. So that would be the recommendation as well, is that have a look at your entire infrastructure and say, where do I want to go and what's the best way to get there?
Excellent. And then sort of going back to COVID-19 and the concept of communications that you teed up, Erik, is there anything else that you guys are doing leveraging G2S in ways that could, as I might have alluded to, maybe reduce employee contact with gaming devices?
I think that speaks again to the point I mentioned earlier that, an example was through our planned implementation of social distancing, we to be certain that various machines are disabled. The sophistication of G2S really allows us to know the machine's true state, which is something we were never able to accurately ascertain under our SaaS platform previously. SaaS was designed with the mindset that slot machines stay on 24/7. I remember when we were helping build the G2S capabilities with the vendors, they're like, why would you have hours of operation for an EGM? That doesn't make any sense. Don't you have your casinos open 24 hours a day? And, the Strip, that's absolutely correct. But in a government gaming program in Canada, we have to have very heavily enforced hours of operation, and we have to be able to ascertain without question that those machines are inactive. to obey prevailing legislation and policy. So that's a capability that was only available with G2S to a sufficient degree of accuracy.
And the regulator.
Sorry, Greg. Go ahead.
The regulator too has the control to turn which machines on or off. In the SaaS world, you could turn off communication and the machine would come back up.
Right.
You can't do that on a VLT. It does need that communication and it will not come up. So when you host disable that device, because of COVID-19, the expectation it's off. And, the only way to turn it back on is through the system and reconfiguring it to be on.
And you, as the regulator, know that it's truly off. You're not guessing that the operator has really turned it off. You know for a fact. And going back to what you said, Erik, about casinos on the Strip in Vegas are 24/7. I've been working in Europe for 2.5, going on 3 years now, and I work with the online gaming side of the business and with the land-based side of the business. And the vast majority of regulated jurisdictions in Europe have parlors, shops, have casinos that are not 24/7, and many of them, in order to comply, physically press the off switch to turn them off. They don't rely on SaaS because the regulators know that SaaS is not reliable from that perspective. Now, you can imagine that given what's going on with this pandemic, and given that casinos have shut down in many jurisdictions around the world, some operators have actually said, we're going to leave the slot machines on, even though we're shutting the front doors, because we're afraid if we power down these games, they might not come back up. Now imagine these various locations in Europe, much like you're describing, where on a daily basis they power off and power on. As machines get old, yes, to Greg's point, the hardware, the PCB boards, they are getting better, but they're still pieces of electronics, and every once in a while something blows up. So to have a protocol that can absolutely make sure that a gaming device is not playable and can show the regulator that it's not playable, I think there's a benefit there that most people don't even think about from a protocol perspective, because to your point, it's a protocol. Who really cares, right?
Well, I think it's also the elegance of the protocol that's often lost with G2S. That those 3,000 pages contain one of the directives I remember seeing. The VLT or the VGM must disable unless these certain conditions are met. SaaS, I don't think it's that explicit. It's on or it's off. But if the machine doesn't get it, well, okay, still keep running. To Greg's point, the protocol is embedded in the operating system of the machine. There's no debate. And if the vendor says, well, we're going to charge you to fix that, well, no, the protocol that everybody in the industry agrees to says you must abide by that direction. So it makes it much easier to explicitly control those machines.
And
great point,
Mark, the central system that the three of us are using, the IGT Intelligent, via the local site controller, also gives the frontline or bar staff the ability to do a temporary local disable. So if you take the current world we're in now, they can, through that site controller, be notified that there's a cache out. So they can, if they choose, they can do a temporary disable, go to that machine, do a sanitary clean down for the next player or patron coming to that machine, go back to their site controller and do a quick re-enable, and all within the control of that one person.
And actually, I'm glad you brought that point up, Paul. A while ago, we had a conversation with an operator on the Strip that uses G2S, and they shared with us a homegrown application that they basically developed that allowed a appropriately approved employees, these were manager level employees, to actually be able to essentially reset a machine using a mobile phone app that they created. So the idea of, hey, there's a problem with a machine and now I have to go physically in front of it to do something, they actually even eliminated that and made it so that machines being down was a very short-lived sort of scenario. So again, they did that through the power of G2S, the openness that Erik, you mentioned, and the ability to leverage it for a variety of different scenarios. So we're getting close to 10 minutes before our hour is up. I wanted to ask one more question, and that is, GSA has been around for over 22 years. We've developed a number of standards. Many of them have been implemented around the world, but we always are challenging ourselves to understand how can we do things better. And one of the questions we ask is, how can gaming vendors, or how can we further support the advancement of G2S in the industry? And I was wondering, as three entities that have deployed G2S, obviously are enjoying the benefits, obviously can very clearly and easily articulate what those benefits are. Can you share some advice on what vendors can do and what we can do better? Anybody?
Yeah, I can start there. And it's a recent news example as well. So we spent the last 15 minutes talking about two different gaming environments, so distributed market and casino floors, and vendors have two different central systems, if you will, for those environments. But recently in Sweden, because Sweden and their video lottery distributed network wanted to go 100% cashless. That's where they wanted their industry to go. And IGT was able to use the current intelligence system that the three of us are using and integrate in from their casino side their Advantage cashless system into the G2S intelligence system. And I think the ability to look at within their business units those verticals and integrate in gives me the sense that there's even further opportunity that I'd personally like to see the vendors look at, how do I take the best of everything I have and cross-pollinate gaming environments.
And I think, Paul, to that point also, given the environment that we're in today, where touching stuff is becoming a little less of a pleasurable thing, people will say, cash is really germy. How can we eliminate handling cash? I think the idea of using a cashless solution, I think I saw in one of the industry publications that Scientific Games also has introduced a number of contactless or cashless capabilities. These are things that can be done quite easily using G2S, and again address real issues. Erik, I saw you were going to answer something. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just saying, that gaming vendors, in my view, need to continue their support along as they have been doing, as happening on the EGM side, and in addition, work harder to be more of a partner than just a provider on the CMS central system side. In addition, the GSA may want to consider ways to engage the technology community at large to educate them of the benefits of G2S from a more holistic technology perspective. For example, perhaps host competitions for the best ideas on potential use cases. Maybe an example would be building a cost-efficient bridge between an interactive and brick-and-mortar environment, leveraging web services capabilities. I think the next big step in G2S evolution won't come from incumbent methods. It will only really come from people thinking big picture and truly wanting and being capable of implementing best-of-breed solutions for many disparate vendors.
That's a very interesting comment. The idea of building a bridge between the interactive and brick and mortar. So I've been spending a lot of time dealing with issues on the online side. And actually, this is not what this webinar is about, but GSA is developing a standard that does in fact bridge online with brick and mortar, and that's our regulatory reporting interface for reporting data to regulators from suppliers, from operators, from systems, be they online, be they land-based, or be they even lottery. So we are, as a matter of fact, thinking about how to build those bridges, not using G2S, but that's a very interesting comment, and you're absolutely right. One of the other things that you said that resonates with me is dealing with the technologists. And one of the challenges that we have as an industry is that, we think of the larger casinos. There are people that have a CIO title. There are people that have a CTO title. There are people that have operational titles, and then you've got the chief executive. The slot floor has typically been in the domain of the slot operators. And I think there's more of a working relationship with IT today than there used to be. But by and large, when we reach out to the technologists and say, we'd like to talk to you about the slot protocol, they look at us and say, go talk to the slot guys. When we talk to the slot guys and we say, we want to talk to you about the slot protocol, they're interested in, well, is it going to make me more money? And your examples today clearly have shown how G2S could generate additional revenues. But really what they're focused on is maximizing the revenue of that casino floor. And truly what they're focused on when you go one layer lower is which game themes are going to resonate with my customer base and it's going to generate more revenue per square footage. So when you start talking about technology, it's difficult to get everybody in the same room. And that's something which obviously we need to improve on. But thank you for raising that, because that's a real issue. We did have one question that we have not addressed as we've gone through this, and that is, so Greg, I think, and the rest of the panelists, you all mentioned downloading software to bill validators and printers, to peripheral devices. Not every peripheral device can be downloaded to, correctly? I mean, there is a cost to replacing that hardware. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Depending on what the hardware is.
All of our VLTs were built to support downloadable. So some of the older equipment and slot floors may not be, but if they have anything in the last 10 years, there is usually a secondary port that you can download onto. So I think with some work, I think you could have just about anything downloadable.
So there might be some investigation in terms of doing a survey of the equipment that you've got, the age of that equipment, whether it could be a matter of a firmware upgrade, or in some cases it might very well be that the peripheral device itself has to be replaced because it does not support the new firmware or does not have, to your point, Greg, a secondary port on it. All right. I think that is all the time that we have. We're running up to the 3-minute mark before the end of the session. Gentlemen, I really do want to thank you again for participating in this first ever IGSA webinar. I appreciate your time and the information, obviously, that you've shared with us. To our audience, I'd like to thank you as well. Thank you for your participation, and thank you for all the questions that you've submitted. As I mentioned before, this webinar will be available to view. Again, click on that YouTube icon at the bottom right of our website, which is igsa.org. If you have any additional questions, or if you've got comments on how we can make these sessions more informative, or if you've got a topic that you'd like us to cover, please feel free to contact us. Again, information on how to do that is also found on our website page. And with that, unless there's anything else, I want to thank you all very, very much. And gentlemen, thank you again for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.